audio difficulties, and some of you may have missed some critical information. I'm Amy Howie, and I'll be leading the session this morning. And we have with us Meredith Keaty Merck, who will be monitoring the chat box. And we are fortunate enough to have Michelle with us from the Department of Education. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. So again, my name is Michelle Oja, as Amy said, and I'm taking over for Steve Yackey's position in charge of Indicator 13 and also overseeing the Certificate of Completion this morning.
Thanks. Statistics, thank you for those of you who let us know that there were some audio challenges in the chat box, and keep those questions coming throughout this session. We're recording and we'll send this out after the webinar with a survey. The brief agenda of what we will cover in the next hour or so, we'll walk you through project success overview, talk briefly about content connectors, and then dig into all of the requirements for the Certificate of Completion. Not know, Project Success is a resource center that operates within the larger Indiana Resource Network. So you can see all of the resource centers that make up this network in Indiana. We all work closely with the Department of Education and serve various roles in providing professional development and resources to special education teachers, directors, building leaders throughout the state. Project Success specific focus is on working with teachers and leaders who support students with significant cognitive disabilities. So we were born about 7 years ago when the Department of Education understood that it was going to be very challenging for the field to make the shift from a functional-based alternate assessment to a very academic achievement-based assessment. So we have since that time been working through from the old I-STAR through NCSIC to the new I-STAR and now to the I-AM alternate assessment. And although we do talk about the assessment from time to time, our primary work has been around instruction and planning and how to support students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. The topics that we cover frequently, and you're just seeing sort of a snapshot of by the numbers on the screen now. We work a lot with teachers on unpacking the content connectors and helping teachers find those pieces of standards and skills and that are starting points for their lesson planning. We've done curriculum mapping with districts. We've worked on writing, have done some collaborative work with the Transition Center and IEPRC around writing goals. We are launching some work around formative assessment this year. That's been really exciting for taking groups who have been planning and increasing their academic instruction for several years and integrating formative assessment. And then as we're doing today, we have done a lot of professional development in the implementation for the Certificate of Completion. We do everything from on-site classroom coaching to webinars, summer institutes. Those are always very popular with teachers because it gives them a time to connect with other teachers who serve the same populations of students that they do. I don't have a screenshot of our website in here, but there are quite a few resources available. It's projectsuccessindiana.com, and I think Meredith is throwing that in the chat box if you want to access any of the resources that are available there. So for those of you who aren't aware, content connectors are Indiana's alternate academic standards. So for most of the students in Indiana, they are expected to master the Indiana academic standards, but for 1% of the population, students who have the most significant disabilities, they are expected to learn Indiana's alternate academic standards. Those are available in K-8 in English, Math, Social Studies, and Science. And this past spring and summer, we were fortunate enough to lead some stakeholders in reviewing, revising, and in many cases writing content connectors for the high school applied courses. And those are applicable in the context of today's webinar, as they are the courses that will count toward the Certificate of Completion. Content connectors are what are used to drive instruction in the classroom on a daily basis. They are also used to align IEP goals, and are what is assessed on in this alternate assessment, which is now called I-AM. Okay, you hear us talk about 1%, and just for clarification, 1% is used in several different contexts. So for ESSA, for accountability purposes, 1% is referring to the number of students that are eligible to earn an alternate diploma. So in Indiana, those regulations have not been completely released. However, there is state law saying that we will have an alternate diploma. The regulations for that are not, and the guidance for that has not been released yet. When we talk about percentage of students who can take an alternate assessment, districts are not to exceed 1% of total students tested, or the state is not to exceed 1% of total students tested. So you may have received information in your districts this year if you were over that 1%. IDOE is currently providing support to districts who were over the 1%. In the ESSA regulations and the Dear Colleague letter that was released in a similar time frame, it was very clear that all students are to be provided access to equitable grade level standards, and it even called out students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So we really, there's very clear language coming from the federal government as well as state guidance that all students are to be provided access to grade level content standards. Along with that, OSEP's results-driven accountability, there's a message that there are no more than 1% of students should earn a certificate of completion, so that links back to that alternate diploma. 99% to receive some sort of diploma. So the default diploma is always the state diploma, the Core 40, and 1% of students should be earning the certificate of completion or alternate diploma. So to take a look at the current numbers in Indiana, this data was provided by the Office of Special Education. You can see in 2015 and 16, Indiana was about 16.5% of students earning a certificate of completion. So remember, 1% of that would be considered an alternate diploma. Last year, just slightly lower, 16.4%. So when you think about it in the context of an alternate diploma should be 1%, there is some work to be done yet in Indiana. It might be interesting for you to go back to your individual districts and take a look at where you are currently. And there can be a variety of reasons for being over 1%. For example, you may be at 1% on students taking the alternate assessment, but then you may have quite a few students junior or senior year for whatever reason able to earn a diploma, and they may have earned a certificate of completion. But it's important to take a look at that data and understand the profiles of the students that are earning a certificate of completion and the reasons behind that. Before we dig into the certificate of completion too much, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute in the chat box to put a 1, 2, or 3. So 1, if this is the first time you've ever heard of the certificate of completion, and 3, if you feel pretty strongly about who you are and maybe just have a few questions. So we just kind of want to get an idea of where the group is. We have a large group on the webinar this morning, so just get an idea of the level of information you have already. All right, so appreciate you participating. It looks like I haven't seen any 1s popped up. It looks like we have quite a few 2s and 3s. So a lot of this for you is review, but I'm happy to answer specific questions that you may have at the end as well. For those of you that it's less familiar, just a quick background on why the change took place. A lot of things were happening sort of simultaneously across the state. There's a transition advisory team that meets. That's a really it's a cross group of stakeholders that includes community groups, parents, special ed directors, superintendents, teachers. It's a nice cross set of people that are all working towards the same end goal for students with the most significant disabilities. And at that time, the alternate assessment was shifting focus, as we mentioned, from functional academic. The folks from VR and workforce development were expressing concerns about not understanding what the readiness of a student who had received a certificate of completion. Parents also were expressing concerns about what does it mean to have a certificate of completion versus a high school diploma. School receiving minimal guidance. I know for those of us that work for the resource centers that are out serving schools across the state, we were noticing that it meant something different everywhere. So the certificate of completion requirements in one district were very different from neighboring districts or districts across the state, what their requirements were. At the same time, the ESSA and the Dear Colleague letter came out that emphasized, as I mentioned earlier, the importance of exposing all students to grade level and grade aligned work. So all those things were coming together at once, and so this work group that I mentioned was already working together and sort of formulated the concerns. also worked to develop the new certificate of completion. So the process went, the course of study, which we're going to pull up here in a minute, was aligned to the diploma. All of the stakeholders had input at various components of the development. There also, at the time, on the work group, there were several different departments at the Department of Education represented, so that's also helpful. From there, we went on to the course descriptions, and those are what you will find as the applied course descriptions, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. And then the professional development, which has been ongoing for a couple of years now, everything from the webinars. The Office of Special Education has a couple of short shares out that talk about the certificate of completion. We've done several on-sites, several webinars. So the professional development is definitely ongoing as schools work to implement the requirements. For the course of study, if you can bear with me a minute here, I'm going to actually pull it up. I think that it's easier to see. So the certificate of completion, this is the Department of Education's website, and the course of study is here both in English and in Spanish. So I'm just going to pull it up. This is probably, for many of you, this is probably why you joined today, to start to understand what this looks like for students earning a certificate of completion. Just quick, for those of you who have not seen this before, you'll notice it looks a lot like the Core 40 and General Diploma. The look and feel of it, that was intentional so that it was easy for everyone to understand that these are the requirements for certificate of completion. You'll notice that the content is English language arts, math, science, social studies, PE, health and wellness. Employability is different than what you would see on Core 40. We're going to talk about that in a minute. A couple of things to note here regarding the course of study. Certificate of completion requires a combination of 40 credits and units. So a credit is like it would be for any student earning a diploma. They've met the requirements of the course and the Indiana Academic Standards. So you have students who have earned credits in classes, those count towards the certificate of completion. However, we know that all students are not going to earn enough credits for a diploma, so they also may earn applied units. A unit is sort of the equivalent to a credit, except for it is on a modified curriculum. So units can be earned in gen ed classes on a modified curriculum, or they can be earned in self-contained classes, special ed classes on a modified curriculum. Teachers who teach applied courses and award units do not have to be highly qualified. So that's a question that comes up frequently. The other main difference that you will notice here is there are not specific courses listed. So for example, it doesn't say Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. It says a balance of number, sense, expressions, computation. That was intentionally done for a variety of reasons. First of all, we know that the needs of students with significant cognitive disabilities vary greatly. We also appreciated the fact that schools implementing this were often deal with limited staffing. For example, there may be rural schools that have one teacher K-12, and so for all students to be able to be exposed to the content that's expected for the certificate of completion, that of course means teachers have to teach that content, and it would be logistically impossible to mandate the specific courses. Now, having said that, the expectation is that the students over their 4 to 6 years are exposed to algebra, math 10, English 9, English 10, a variety of the social studies and science classes, but they're not specifically required specifics. That also supports them to move from district to district so that they're not set behind if certain districts are able to offer some courses where others are not. Big piece here is the employability, and we know that students earning a certificate of completion are very unlikely going to attend a university or a trade school once they exit high school. So this employability piece becomes critical in preparing them for options after high school. The employability classes would be anything that is related to a work or project-based experience, anything about employability skills, anything to post-secondary options. A lot of schools that are already implementing the certificate of completion are using things like college and career readiness, career exploration, internship, your ICE programs, any CTE program. And remember, those can be on a modified curriculum. So the expectations for what a student earning a diploma would be in an internship may be drastically different than what internship looks like for a student earning a certificate of completion, and that is okay because they are earning a unit on a modified curriculum rather than a credit. Selectives are just like any other diploma. Those are any of the credits that either you have the requirements for math, science, social studies, English, and so forth, and those courses then become electives, or any of the electives that a student would choose in their daily schedule, such as a fine art or additional PE and health and wellness courses. The components here are the Certificate of Completion Transition Portfolio, and this is something that they are currently working on guidance. There's a subgroup from that original work group I mentioned earlier that designed the Certificate of Completion. There's a subgroup that's been looking at what already exists in Indiana that some districts are using for transition portfolios, what are some new and upcoming things that are available, and really trying to hammer out what the requirements of the transition portfolio are. So one of the things that has come up is the Indiana Career Explorer. That will be required for all students next year, and all 8th grade students next year, as part of their planning with their counselors beginning in 8th grade. That may also be an option for the transition portfolio. There are others that have been looked at, and it's my understanding, and Michelle can jump in here if I'm speaking incorrectly, it's my understanding that the platform by which the portfolio will be housed will not be mandated by the Office of Special Ed, but the criteria and the items that need to be included in the transition portfolio will be outlined in guidance that will be available soon.
That is correct, Amy.
Okay, all right. The last piece here below the transition portfolio are the 4 areas that a student must complete at least one of. Career credential, career experience, work ethics certificate if your district participates in that, or any other work-related activity. So sometimes these 4 offer create a sense of concern for districts. I always tell folks that I'm working with is if you've met the employability requirements and you've been intentional about the opportunities you've provided for kids in the 4 to 6 years that they've been with you, you will not have any trouble meeting one of those 4 criteria. This does not mean all of a sudden that your students with significant cognitive disabilities have to be able to pass a CNA license at the vocational school. It does not mean that they have to, that their career experience is going to look like the student earning a diploma. It just needs to show that they have participated and schools have been mindful in the opportunities that they've provided for students while they're at high school, preparing them for post-secondary. The assumptions that the group maintained as this course of study was developed were high expectations for all students with shared responsibility. So you've heard me mention a few times that the bar really has been raised, and the ESSA requirements were very clear that students were to have grade level aligned access to content and to standards. One piece of this is that it is a shared responsibility, and as we've talked about units and earning credits in units, as schools are implementing, we're seeing more and more students being integrated into general education classes and getting some experiences there. This does not mean that students have to earn units in gen classes, but the assumption is that it is such a shared responsibility. So that's why when we look at the roles of the participants on this webinar today, I saw teachers, I saw leaders, I saw counselors, I saw administrators, special ed directors, and that's wonderful because it really does show an interest and a dedication to making this a shared responsibility. As I mentioned, general education courses are accessed whenever appropriate. Of course, those are going to be student-specific and really determined by the skills and the needs and the supports available for students. If IEP goals are aligned, question we get often too is, what about the communication skills? A lot of our students that fall into this this group of students have complex communication needs. There's not a specific course for communication, reading, problem solving, social skills, but the expectation is that those functional type skills that we've always worked on will be integrated into all of the courses. So those will be things that will be really part of the instruction that's added into the content of the course. Course repeated with new goals if appropriate, and more than 4 years may be needed for completion of the certificate. So as we're mentioning up here, and we'll get to this a little bit more when we look at the applied course description, but for example, students who are taking biology fall and spring that are earning a diploma, once they've taken biology fall and spring and earned their credits, they're finished. But for students on the certificate of completion earning units, the course can actually be repeated for 4 units, so 2 for fall and 2 for spring. That's for a variety of reasons. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, logistically and students moving from district to district, or maybe working with one teacher who's going to have courses repeated every other year. For that would be, we know students with significant cognitive disability require a lot of repetition, so it may be absolutely appropriate to take the same course over with different goals. And third, we know that the expectation is to access gen ed courses whenever appropriate. So for example, a student may take in a special ed room, let's use the biology example again, may take biology their freshman year in a special education room. After they take biology in a general education classroom. It may still be on and it may still be for a unit, but that would give them an opportunity to have that content at a more rigorous level. This is a question. So we had questions about the portfolio criteria have not been released by the Department of Education yet. I do believe that is close. I'm looking at Michelle. Within the next, do you have a timeline?
Should release by the summer.
Summer, okay. And someone else mentioned Naviance. I always say in my perfect dream world, Naviance is going to call me up and ask what they need to do to their technology so that it's appropriate for the certificate of completion portfolio. I definitely think there are pieces of it. I think that Naviance will be one of the approved, if not using Indiana Career Explorer, is there an option to use another approved?
Now, there is an application if the district is not using Indiana Career Explorer to apply for an alternative.
Yep.
I don't have specific directives as far as how that translates to the portfolio yet.
Okay, yeah. So Naviance and Indiana Career Explorer, while they are similar, they do have differences, and I think they're strong in different areas. The way that Naviance is now, it may require a little bit of work to make it work for portfolio, but certainly it's a robust tool that could be used for that. So hopefully once the guidance of the criteria are out, then you can start aligning the criteria to whatever tool you're using. Naviance and Indiana Career Explorer are the only two that I'm really familiar with. There very well may be others out there.
Naviance is a great tool for doing some exploration with those employability skills, and can certainly be a good tool when you're creating transition plans. So I wouldn't discount the program. It's just, as Amy said, it's a little bit of tweaking in order to really for that portfolio piece.
Yep. One of the things we always tell districts when we're providing professional development around anything is, what are your gen ed students using? What curriculum are they using? What maps are they using? What lesson plan templates? And so the same holds to Naviance. If you're in a district that's already using Naviance, it just makes sense to do the same thing for your students that are earning the certificate.
Would you also discuss the difference between credit and applied?
Sure. So there's a couple questions in the chat box about the difference between a credit and applied unit. So a credit is as would be for any student that in a course that counts towards a diploma. So also count towards certificate of completion. The difference is an applied unit does not count towards a diploma. It only counts towards the certificate of completion. And applied units are a modified curriculum. So that's the biggest indicator. If you are working with a student, whether it's in a gen ed class or a special education class, if the curriculum and the standards, well, first of all, if you're using content connectors, it's automatically going to be an applied unit. if you're using Indiana academic standards to plan instruction and you modify the content that you've moved the mark, so we're not just providing support and accommodations, but we've actually modified the curriculum, then the student needs to earn a unit, and it would only count towards the certificate of completion.
Another question is, can they take a gen ed class pass-fail, or do they need,
Okay, so good question. Can students take a general ed class pass-fail for a unit? The answer to that question is yes. We get the grading question a lot. Grading will always remain a district-level decision. We do have a lot of districts that are using pass-fail when students are taking applied units in the general education setting. I think to help with communication with parents and with gen ed teachers. That's certainly not the case everywhere. Other places issue grades. We just need to be very clear about what that grade represents and that it's not for a credit, it's for a unit, therefore indicating the curriculum is modified. Is there a part two to that question?
No, that was really it. Just talking about whether it needed to be a grade or could it be pass-fail with the applied.
Yep, so absolutely can be pass-fail or grade.
Another question, is the certificate of completion connected to the IM assessment? And are the students taking IM assessment the only students that can get a CFC?
That's an excellent question. The question, in case you could not hear, is the certificate of completion connected to the IM assessment? And they are connected in the sense that they are both driven by the alternate standards, the content connectors. So all the applied courses are using content connectors, and the IM assesses content connectors. So they are related in that sense. The second part of that question is, can only students taking IM receive the certificate of completion? And that is, in the IEP, those are two different decisions. However, the population should be similar. That's not to say there will never be a student who earns a certificate of completion that did not take the IM assessment. However, if you continue to think around that, the 1% of students that it's appropriate for, it's the same in both cases. But remember back when we looked at the data, there are currently 16% of students earning a certificate of completion in Indiana, while there are only 1.3% of students taking IM. So clearly there's a difference there. And we know, I mean, those of you who work in the high school every day understand the reality of students and passing that algebra 2 usually is a big one. So then those tough decisions are made to help students earn a certificate of completion. But thinking about guidance that will be issued at some point around the alternate diploma, students who do not have significant cognitive disabilities will not receive an alternate diploma or will count in accountability for an alternate diploma. So keeping that in mind, we really need to make our best effort to get the other 99% of students earning a diploma. Okay.
One of the other questions was around the certificate of attendance. Is there still a certificate of attendance?
So there's a question around certificate of attendance, and that I'm not going to be able to answer that with a level of certainty. I believe those are also locally designed, or exit certificates, if you will. That's not something that is tracked by the Department of Education, or by secondary university.
Yeah, that's more of a local decision based.
Yep. I'm going to switch gears here to the course descriptions. So for those of you that are in the high school and accustomed to working with students to do scheduling, you're familiar with this document. I'm just going to scroll here. This is just the applied courses, so these are not including the courses that are for credit. So the layout is very similar. This first one here is Applied Business Math. The coding, the state coding, it has an A behind it. That's the indicator that it is applied. Now, we know a little bit about reporting. The Department of Education has a group that works closely with SIS vendors, so whether you're a Skyward School, Power School, or you have your own system, those The vendors are well aware of these changes, and they've been working with local districts and the Department of Education to make sure that the back end is set up correctly. So for those of you responsible for the master schedule or for scheduling students, you understand that there is a lot of work in assigning courses and assigning the recommended levels and how many credits they can earn, if it's repeatable, does it count into GPA, all of sort of those logistical type things that school counselors are used to doing. There is some setup for the certificate of completion, but just know if you have someone in your district has likely already spoken to the vendor, your SIS vendor, and has put those things into place. If not, contact person is, because I think it was, I think it's new as well.
It is.
We can send that out afterwards. There's a contact at the Department of Education who's led that group of collaboration with the SIS vendors. So this is where they would get the data from that. At the local level, you can call the course, you can call your course codes whatever you want, but just know that when you go to the course completion and the course enrollment and complete reports, you'll need the new state titles. Probably one thing that we did when we created these course descriptions for the applied courses, we went through the, I don't know, hundreds of state-approved course titles and selected the ones that we felt would be most likely utilized by teachers of students with significant cognitive disabilities, which we thought seemed like a really good idea at the time. In hindsight, it probably was, it may have been a mistake because it's been a little bit misleading, and we get the question a lot. If there's not an applied course description, can a student still take it as an applied unit? The answer to that is yes. Any course that is approved by the Department of Education can be taken for a credit or a unit, whether or not there are applied course descriptions. So I want to be very clear about that, because the applied course descriptions are helpful for teachers teaching those courses so that they know what standards apply and what the course descriptions are, but courses are eligible for a unit. So you can see here on the applied course descriptions, it gives the recommended grade level, the number of units, which I mentioned earlier is roughly doubled from the number of credits for the aligned course. It also tells which components that it counts for. So this particular case fulfills a mathematics requirement for certificate of completion. It also counts as an elective. So this document, a lot of districts are implementing have incorporated this document into their student handbooks or tweaked it to match what their handbooks look like. It can go alongside the gen ed courses. It can be a pull-out as a separate, whatever works for your district. So I think we have a couple more questions.
Alternate diploma the same as the certificate of completion?
Okay, so is the alternate diploma the same as the certificate of completion? The short answer to that is no, not yet. That's not a that's a tricky answer. So let me back up. The certificate of completion has always existed in Indiana, and it has been it's been changed to be what we've been talking about today. So the course of study, the course students, all of that is the current certificate of completion that schools are to implement and report as of next year. The alternate diploma is now allowed by ESSA and adopted into Indiana state law. What the alternate diploma looks like has not yet been determined. So when we developed the certificate of completion, the guidelines were already out, and it fits perfectly into ESSA's criteria for alternate diploma. Whether or not Indiana adopts the certificate of completion as it is, as Indiana's alternate diploma, we do not know yet. So it would say likely that they will align. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is alternate diploma, no matter what it looks like, will only be, for accountability purposes, will only be awarded for students with significant cognitive disabilities, so 1%.
Another question was a student with very significant disability, limited communication.
Yep.
Emphasize how that hits the certificate of completion and how it can be modified for all students.
Sure.
Despite levels of need.
Yep. So the question that we just received was, what about students with the most significant disabilities? So students that have complex communication needs, medically fragile, miss school periodically, health issues, or the kids that really have high support needs. Is the certificate of completion designed for them? Absolutely, yes. That is they definitely fall within that 1% that we have been talking about. Remember, we talked about a unit as a modified curriculum, so if the appropriate supports are provided, and if the curriculum is modified to meet the needs of that student, then they earn the unit for that course, which would apply to the certificate of completion. So what a unit looks like for a student who has a less significant disability and what a unit looks like for the student that we just described may be different, but they're both able to earn the certificate of completion. The work that we do in Project Success when we are providing professional development to districts is helping teachers unpack those standards and design lessons that meet the needs of all students. So we have kids that maybe have just recently made the decision to earn a certificate of completion, to kids that we've known for quite some time that have real intense support needs in the same class. And so what does instruction look like for all of those students aligned to grade level standards, or in this case, content connectors?
Is they're currently offering courses like social skills, personal care management, from the course descriptions for a minute and where that would kind of fall in there.
Yep, so the question is, what about some of the more traditional courses that have been offered in the past, such as social skills or rec leisure or personal care? Those are courses that are no longer approved by the Department of Education, so they will need to be integrated into other courses. So some of the things, that's another thing that we've done as some of the professional development is taking a look at what's currently being taught and figuring out where that falls into the scope and sequence of the applied courses. So for example, if we're working on in personal finances is a common one. We may be working on money management. Well, the business math example that I gave may be appropriate for that. Personal financial responsibility, which is a FACS in a business class, might be appropriate for that. But really, it's taking a hard look at what you're teaching and seeing if it aligns to the content connectors, and if it does, then making sure it's in that course where it's appropriate, and if it does not align to the content connectors, figuring out if that is continue to be a priority for students.
Yeah, we got the rest. The last one was about a qualified teacher for those applied courses, and I answered it on the chat board.
Okay. Yep. All right. So if you have questions, continue to put them in the box. We through the applied courses. This is just to mention again, are on our Project Success site and also on the Department of Education website. There are several examples of what it might look like for a student on a 4- or 6-year plan that can be helpful to take a look at. We also have an example on here that we've done if you're thinking about as a school what it might look like for your students over a 4-year, just in general. Of course, electives are going to vary by student and if they're going to vary by student. This is just a sample that we were working with a particular district that wanted to figure out what it would look like freshman, sophomore, junior year. Some of the common things that we've seen are that taking a look at if you are lucky enough to have more than one teacher that's serving students with significant disabilities in your building, a lot of schools historically have separated kids by ability, and a lot of places are rethinking that and separating kids, maybe still by ability, but looking at staffing and thinking about maybe splitting the content. So, for example, instead of me teaching the students with higher skills all of the content areas, I might teach all of the students just English and social studies, and then my partner teacher might teach math and science. So a lot of restructuring. This is a good time as you're implementing the certificate of completion to kind of take a step back and look at your program as a whole. Other districts are thinking about where they want to provide those career experiences, and do they want that to be spread out throughout the 4 years. As an example, in this one, you can see preparing for college and careers the freshman year, sophomore year, career formation exploration, junior year, internship, senior year, ability elective, and co-op or ICE program. So this would be one approach to it. Other schools and districts have taken the approach of we're going to go heavy on the academics, freshman, sophomore, junior year, and then we're going to institute a really solid transition program or 18 to 22-year-old program their junior and beyond. So there's no right way to do this, or there's several right ways to go about it. It's just a matter of looking at team and what you have, what your resources are, and making decisions that are going to be best for kids, but that are also going to work for adults, because this is a lot of shift for teachers as well. I believe most of the slides are just examples, so I think this is probably a good place to stop. I'm leaving these in here because they will be posted for you to review. If you want to use these templates as you begin planning in your districts, they could be helpful. Again, these are just questions that need to be answered. Some of them you may already have answered. Some of them you may need to sit down with your team and your administrators to move things forward. So with that, questions, if there are, please put those in the box.
So one of the questions, questions was around the 1%. And I'm just reading it verbatim. We truly believe that we have more than the 1%.
Yep. For
the COC, what do we do?
Yep. So the question was, we truly believe we have more than 1% for JVF completion. What do we do? And I think that there's no one answer for that. I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. And I want to be very clear. The state was at 6% currently, right? Was it 16%?
We round, yeah.
Yeah. So that's not going to fall, that's not going to drop to 1% next year. That is not realistic. A couple of things to think about. One, as we're implementing qualifications for students in elementary school, we are going to see fewer students being placed into that certification early on, so which in fact will mean more students will be able to earn a diploma. Also, I think as we've increased core instruction for gen ed, and as your MTSS practices in your districts are solid and your interventions are in place, that's going to support students who are not able to get over that hump and earn their diploma currently. But for students who are sitting in your building right now that are maybe 16, 17 years old that have been in special ed classes since they were in second grade, you're right. It's going to be, that hurdle is insurmountable. So you're not going to probably be able to move that dial. I think with that, the important thing is, if they are earning the certificate of completion, is to realize what is their greatest potential and getting them into some appropriate employability experiences, and work experiences, so that they're as ready for post-secondary options as they can be.
Question was around case conferences. Do we hold a case conference to make these changes?
I'm not sure I understand the question. The question that Meredith read is, do we have to hold a case conference to make these changes?
Yes, make the changes of placement is what it's saying. So we may need some clarification.
So if you're talking about it is a case conference decision whether or not a student earns a diploma or a certificate of completion. So that would be yes if you feel like you need to change. If you've heard something here today that you feel like you need to change a student's diploma, then yes. If you're talking about the alternate assessment or the general ed assessment, that's also a case conference decision. As far as courses, if you're taking an applied course, it could change. If you're taking it in a gen ed class, it could change your LRE potentially. But if it's an applied course, courses don't decide the specific. I know it's common practice, but technically, case conferences do not decide the courses a student takes. Case conferences write IEP goals that align to grade level standards and make assessment decisions and diploma decisions, but they don't. I know that I want to recognize it's common practice to choose students' courses for the following year. I get that, but those really are not case conference decisions. The placement, whether it's gen ed or special ed, yes. The assessment, yes. The IEP goals, yes. Diploma type, yes. So unless you're going from a gen ed setting to a special ed setting or vice versa, then I don't believe you'd need another case conference.
Yeah, and then there was one more.
Sure.
Um,